Thank you all for showing up. Brandon and I are going to share a quick poem before we get things kicked off.
What is it?
He wrote it.
Sacrifice. Who are you?
I'm Ben. This is Brandon.
I've been.
People will live their whole lives listening to stories that have been told, from the time that they were naive and young to the time that they are gray and old.
Stories can teach many lessons in our lives that can influence our personality, like F. Scott Fitzgerald's portrayal of dissatisfaction in his well-known novel, The Great Gatsby.
Sometimes they can inspire us to remember, to love each other as God loves you and me, like Anthony Doerr so beautifully emphasizes in All the Lights We Cannot See.
Some stories can be dull, and some stories can fill you with glee. Some are like Silas Marner, and some are like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Tonight we have a story that is up there with Goldilocks and the Three Bears, or Jack and his Beans. And ladies and gentlemen, here is Annika Moreno with her masterpiece, Good Night, Irene.
I just want to thank you all for coming. It means a lot to me.
We love you!
Yeah, I wrote this story and it's kind of been a long process. I started it last semester in one of my creative writing classes, and I don't know, I just really fell in love with writing the story. I remember when my professor asked me to write it, I was so mad. I don't really know why, but I was just like, I don't want to write this story, and I'm going to do my best to stay away from the prompt as possible, but still like vaguely hit the prompt. So I wrote Good Night, Irene. I don't know if y'all know, but at the Chicken, the very last song they play is Good Night, Irene. And I love the chicken. Most of y'all know that. I talk about it a lot. I go there a lot, so yeah.
I'll be back.
There's my mom, Sherry Moy, in the background. Also, I want y'all to keep in mind, I have 2 signed copies of... So I ask that you remember, try to pay attention, because I'm going to ask some questions at the end of the story. And if you get them right, you get a copy of Good Night, Irene. So... Can everyone hear me? Yes. Is this a good volume for me to read? Yes. Okay. I'm going to stand here.
Okay.
Yeah, she is.
Okay. Oh, let me preface a little bit. So this story has 3 parts. There's part 1, part 2, part 3. Part 1 and part 3 are in the present tense. Part 2 is in the past tense. And I'll kind of give you a little hint so that you know that's what's happening. Hey. I'm just about to start. You didn't miss anything.
Yes.
Oh, wait. Keep in mind, I have 2 signed copies. So if you remember the facts, you get a copy.
Look at me, there's a whole room.
Austin.
Hey, come in,
Floor.
please.
Please?
Please, take a floor.
Get them.
Come on, Blake. Sit down. Through the hallway, man.
Okay. I'm reading from the Book of Irene. Okay, but seriously, Good Night, Irene. Okay. Our house was a mess. Dishes in the sink were piling up. The towels needed to be folded, and the smell of trash floated around the house. The dark room where I sat became too comfortable. The curtains were drawn to a close, my body always strategically placed in the corner of the room in my blue velvet chair. The velvet against my skin brought the slightest sense of comfort. The tissues that once were held in boxes were now scattered around the floor. "Claire, get over here," a loud voice yelled from my bedroom. All the lights in the house were off, and the shadows lurked like villains. My shaky hand reached out to touch the walls to know I was conscious, and that this wasn't a dream. I know the bedroom I walk into is mine, but it never feels like it. The floral wallpaper is disturbingly dreadful. There are hues of red mixed within what remind me of the first blood transfusion my husband received, before the joy and kindness left him, before my life became gray and dusted. Sheets were wrinkled, the comforter smelled of mold, and my ill husband lied on the floor with his head thrown back on the shag rug. Unconsciously, my eyes dashed in a backwards roll to see the black in my mind. "Why is this man on the ground?" my mother asked. She walked past me and began to yell about how if I was a good wife, my husband wouldn't have gotten cancer, and he'd be better, and our marriage would be better, and our kids would be more respectful. As usual, I said nothing, and instead cut my mother with a glare. "You know I'm talking to you. Help me pick him up and get him on the bed." "Yes, Mom." Our bodies bent over, struggled to move his. I had the strength, but it was impossible to give it. My legs could usually squat pounds greater than his body weight, but today they trembled like shaky fingers high on caffeine. All concentration that I had to focus on lifting him rushed towards my eyes and forced tears to come tumbling violently out of them. The entirety of my body collapsed on the ground. As I fell, my head dropped back and clicked on the radio. My mother stood, stared, and shook her head. The static played for what seemed like ages. Gray and black, blurry screens instantly filled my imagination. Suns appeared and set, and moons felt like they rose before a signal was finally reached. "Irene, good night. Irene, good night. Good night, Irene. Good night, Irene. I'll see you in my dreams." The far gone but familiar song played loudly and in tune. The corners of my lips shot towards my ears. My heartbeat slowed to a calm rhythm that went in sync with the song. It's been years since I felt at peace in this house. But the peace only lasts for so long. It was fleeting. And I knew once the 2 minutes passed, it would soon slip away. I wanted to go back, away from today. Things in my life were changing day by day, with each day looking much different from the next. It was becoming too much to sit here and wallow. I was tired because this was an everyday occurrence. Giving is exhausting when there's no reciprocity, but how can he? He's been sick with colon cancer for years and slowly gaining back his health, just not fast enough. They caught it early enough to be treated, and the doctors did just that. But the medicine altered more than the explosive cells. He lost. He lost the things that made him who he was. My mother moved from behind my husband and disappeared into the next room. I took this moment to flee the scene. I ran to my car and drove away. The drive that was quick and fast-paced, and once the car was parked, my feet dashed towards the place I used to call home. It was numbing to walk through the wooden doors of the Chicken. This was no longer the same bar I knew so well 20 years ago. The neon lights were blinding. Punk college boys were playing pool and flirting with the naive girls who wanted a little too much attention. I darted for a table in the back left corner, and it was ours. And maybe, just maybe, if I could sit there one more time, everything would be okay. As I moved closer, the wooden floors creaked louder than ever. Brad Paisley was playing in the background. He sang joyous odes to the one he loves, while I do everything in my power to visualize the man I once loved. Again, I couldn't control it. The tears violently spewed from my eyes. Memories began to play through my head. We were young here, his hair still intact, and mine a little less frizzy. The smiles were endless, the dancing was easy. I wanted it to end. I wanted to go home, because those were only memories. How could I ever think it would be the same again? This place that was once my home was now a prison. People surrounded me, but all I felt was loneliness. His presence was felt, his heartbeat, the sound of his voice, the smell of his detergent, because that boy would never pick up a bottle of cologne. He thought it was cheesy and even rude to force a scent upon someone. It was always weird to me, but how I'd do anything to have him. The wooden chairs are not comfortable. They never were. But I rest peacefully at our back left corner table. The chairs are built from hardwood that is susceptible to the cold. It courses through the chair in a way that pierces a person deeply, a way that makes them know they are alive. I hope to feel something, anything really, anything to make me feel like someone's wife again. No matter how hard I wish to go back, it's just not possible. So I pick up my shiner and sip. This was our beer. The dark, bold taste brings me back to a special moment, the moment I fell in love with Kevin. So now we're going to the past. The Chicken was a home for me, a place I often found myself. where I grabbed a casual beer with friends, wrote the occasional paper, and even rested in between classes. This particular Wednesday night, I was writing my first paper for my intro into English class. I was doing everything in my power to prove Sophocles was wrong, and Oedipus really did have free will. I was full of angst and mad at the world, angry that things were going nuts and people were evil, and I had to read stuff by Sophocles. I sat in the back left corner table and started my paper. Blue and purple neon lights illuminated the walls, deer's heads were mounted like nails. Beers were being passed around like candy, and here I was, alone, diving into my own world. Line by line I wrote. The paper was a lost cause at its early stages. There was seemingly no hope for anything I wrote. My argument was flawed, my writing was weak, and sources were fraudulent. The table next to me was filled with The table next to me was filled with obnoxious core boys. I could tell by their uniformly shaved heads. I glared at them, hoping one would catch the hint to settle down so I could continue to bash Sophocles. As my eyes focused on the group, I saw they were joyful, full of peace. They laughed at the simple things. They had faith in who they were and what their futures held. They had something I didn't. They were free. Despite the rules they were subject to obey, they were free. I, enslaved by my paper and the own rules I made up in my head, would have never hooped and hollered in a bar. Soon enough, my glare was caught by a measly cadet. A cadet I could call a friend. His name was Kevin. He walked over with a contagious grin. "Claire, why do you got that look on your face again?" he said. "Can you tell your friends to be quiet?" I said. His muscular arm grabbed a chair from another table. And planted himself inches away from me. It was a little too close, but I didn't budge. My body was frozen. Did I want this? His deep brown eyes met mine as the neon lights reflected off of them. He had a way with words. Oh wait, no, sorry. He had a way of deepening my thoughts. He was the charming, thoughtful, caring, cool guy that should have not been seen with a frizzy-haired, four-eyed bookworm of a girl. We ran in different crowds, mine full of sappy liberal arts majors with bodies inked in tattoos and questionable hair dyes, and his full of clean-shaven but secretly rogue cadets. The only thing we had in common was our lack of words. We were the quiet ones, the wallflowers, the deep thinkers and monumental dreamers. He never failed to intrigue me. "Claire, what are you thinking about?" he said. "Nothing, just how did Sophocles get away with writing this? How did anyone see the goodness of his work?" I said. Whoa, don't get too into this. This is only a paper," he said. "It's not just a paper. The grade I get on this paper determines my future. But anyways, creativity takes courage, and there's nothing courageous about this piece," I said. "Okay, Henry Matisse, but this was their truth. They saw this as real and unquestionable," he said. "That is crap, and you know it, Kevin," I said. "What if fate is something to be fixed? What if our lives have been written out for us? What if you're writing someone or something into existence right now?" he said. He began to smirk. This always happened. I would start to complain and dwell in my strong opinions, and he'd challenge every part of my argument. I hated that I secretly loved this, and even sometimes hoped he'd do it. He was challenging, but never rude. "Kevin, come back over and finish the game," some boy from the crowd yelled. "Finish without me, I'm learning about Sophocles," he said. Pivoting his body... Pivoting his body towards me, Kevin asked, "Hey Claire, want a shiner?" I nodded. We walked to the bar together. He smoothly communicated with the bartender that he needed 2 beers. The bartender was a rather large and muscular man that seemed to know Kevin very well.
Oh, muscle.
Everyone's muscular. Kevin was good with people, and the bartender had a charming smile that could please just about everyone. Their interaction was by far one of the most comforting things I had ever seen. When Kevin talked to you, he maintained solid eye contact, listened, and asked questions. When you spoke with him, you felt like the only person on the planet. After we both had a beer in our hands, we walked towards our table. This was an exceedingly long walk. There were people everywhere, and at times I felt like I was in a mosh pit for some heavy metal rock concert. He led the way and reached out for my hand. My head thought it was... oh, was to guide me along after him, but my heart knew he wanted a sneaky way to hold my hand. After what seemed to be a million years, we were back at our table with our backs against the wooden chairs. "Why'd you choose to write about Sophocles anyways?" he asked. "I guess it was just the first thing that popped into my head," I said. He began to ask more questions, ones that were of no relevance to him. This was usual for him, to be smooth and good with his words, but there was nothing casual about this interaction. Little by little, another part of my body began to slightly shake. It wasn't noticeable to anyone besides me, or at least I hoped. The temperature in the bar seemed to increase 10 degrees at that moment. Sweat slowly ran down the back of my neck. My fingers began to tear the Shiner label into tiny pieces. In this way, I had some control. I was able to mold something and control the outcome. But I had thoughts about how Kevin never fails to put me first. I don't remember much about how I looked in this moment, but I know how I felt. Uncomfortable. Silly for thinking this could be more than just a friendship. It was unthinkable for me to dive deeper into this idea because this was familiar, and I never found that annoying. The schedule of my life was great, but at this time my desire for an answer far outweighed my love for routine. "Why do you do this?" I asked. "Do what?" he said. "This. You always do this for me. You leave your friends no matter how good the game of dominoes, pools, or craps is. You buy me a beer, and you leave them every time to come sit next to me, and most of the time I'm complaining about how much I hate this dead person's thoughts," I said. "I do it because I like you, Claire," he said. His eyes were fixated on me, and their corners began to crinkle. Brown never looked so pure. The eye contact we held at this moment was more intimate than any words could ever possibly be. Before it got too close, I averted my gaze towards my paper. It took everything in me to focus once again on my assignment. Gazes can be felt and ignored, but this one had an authority that couldn't be glossed over. I lifted my eyes to meet his once again. He was still watching me. In every part of my life, I try to be poetic, but for now I'm going to divert from that persona. This boy was hot. Like hot. It's easy to be stared at by a not hot boy. You shrug your shoulders and carry on. But when a hot boy stares at you relentlessly, it demands a response. I like you. There, I said it, and I won't take it back. I'm not saying this because now is the right time or because I've always known I like the way you laugh at very morbid things. I say this because you bring me joy, Kevin said. Wait, did you mean that? I said. Yes, I meant it, he said. My mouth stayed shut, but my eyes revealed the intentions of my heart. It was weird telling a boy I liked him. Words of that sort never came from my mouth. I was never the girl to express my feelings. They were better kept inside or written deep within the personas of the characters I wrote about. My palms were sweaty, and my heart felt like it could come straight out of my chest. It felt like the whole bar had stopped. People around us became blurry as my gaze focused on the cadet in front of me. He continued to speak. Those words were a blur, but they were graceful and seemed to flow like a river from his mouth. The night drew to a close, and the clock struck 1:57 a.m. like it did every night. "Good night, Irene" played over the loudspeaker. It all happened before our eyes. People came in sober and left drunk. The bartender called last call before we could even hear his friends say goodbye. "Irene, good night. Irene, good night. Good night, Irene. Good night, Irene. I'll see you in my dreams." The song seemed to end before the night even began. Kevin asked to walk me home. With each step, I became increasingly nervous. It scared me that this could possibly be the beginning of something great. He could be the one, the man I would spend forever with. The streets were dimly lit. The wind began to push my hair into my face. My hands were tucked away within the confines of my pockets and too stubborn to immerse themselves into the cold winter air. So I left the hair to blanket my face. Kevin began to speak about the weather. With each word, my head turned to watch him. Lips are a weird thing. Essentially, they were just simply two pieces of flesh that allowed or punished words from reaching the surface. And his were allowing these to reach the surface. His were nice and easy to look at, and in fact his whole face was easy to look at. Our feet stopped under the tall light post closest to my house. It seemed as if this light were made for a love story. He looked at me and laughed, moving the hair covering my face behind my ear. His hand lingered there, and his warm honey brown eyes gazed into mine. Time stood still like a painting. So now we're going to the present tense. Okay. The future I go back to is scary, but I can't run back to the past. It is only alive in memories and dreams, but I'll take my chances. It's easier to move and to run away, so I do. My body jets towards the exit swiftly and with ease. I have waited a long time to run away from the hurt, from the cancer, and all the sacrifices I have made for my husband. Memory after memory of Kevin and I play through my head, from the day we met to the day I accidentally threw up on his senior boots. In my mind, he's sitting outside his house waiting for me, with the same brown eyes surrounded by a few more wrinkles lining his oddly symmetrical face, his cheeks raised and his teeth larger than ever. I get into my car once again and drive to the last place I remember him living, 204 Greenway Drive. If I drove quickly, it could be about a 5-minute drive from the chicken, so I push it to 4. Shortly after graduation, Kevin made the old home in the stupid suburban neighborhood I always dreamed about his bachelor pad. The crappy yellow truck that sometimes broke down was parked all the way into the garage. From far away, the front yard was well kept, almost immaculate. But as I got closer to the door, the beauty faded. Chips and cracks within the paint caught my gaze. Long green weeds tangled around my feet almost pulled me to the ground. There are a solid 2 feet between my heart and the door. Beat by beat, the blood pumps faster and faster through my veins. God only knows if there's enough blood inside my body to be filtered this quickly. Knuckles knock on the door, and a barely audible sound presents itself. My body immediately turns the other way as a loud creak comes from behind. "Claire?" someone answers. This male's voice is unrecognizable, and this 180 I'm about to do is going to hurt. His body is old, but still handsome. Wrinkles line his soft brown eyes just as I thought they would. He still has that silly haircut. Teeth white as Floridian sand caught my gaze. Everything just as I imagined. He led me inside and directed me to pictures. Hung around the walls of his many vacations around the world. Happiness lined his words as details of memories poured from his lips. We sat across from each other on 2 separate leather love seats as a coffee table divided us. This was how it was supposed to be, us in the same home, talking, laughing, loving. He told the story of his life. No wife, no kids. He even mentioned his hopeful dreams of me running back to him. Still, he makes me laugh, until I feel like I'm about to throw up. His eyes still watch me the way a young Texan child sees snow for the first time. It seemed as if the 20 years we spent apart never happened, and I almost wish they never did. Sometimes moments can tell more than an entire experience. They convince, convict, and hold hostage until it's time for the next one. At this moment in my life, I've been hurt quite a few times already. From my first heartbreak in the 2nd grade to the moment I didn't get that raise I thought I deserved. It all hurt, but those heartbreaks only slightly prepared me for this one. As much as I'd love to stay here, there's no room for me. It's tempting to come back to this because Kevin is healthy, kind, and welcoming to me after all this time. But he isn't the man that promised me forever. That's the reality of my life. Did I make a mistake in not choosing my best friend? Most people would say yes after knowing how it ended. Yes, it would be considered a mistake. But I didn't marry Kevin. I wanted to 1,000 times over, but timing hasn't always played on my team. Sometimes it worked in my favor, but not always. After that magical night, Kevin disappeared for a while. I continuously went to the chicken to write my paper in hopes I'd run into him. However, each visit ended with the same result: no Kevin. Slowly I began to go to the chicken just for fun and began ordering my own beers. The bartender had a way with words and encouragement. He was smooth, flirty, and charming, and boy did he know it. Quickly we fell in love. He swept me off my feet years ago, and I wonder if that version of him is still there. Love is a promise, a usually misunderstood promise. But you keep the promise despite the normality to lose it. I will make the sacrifice to love him, despite the setbacks, hurt, or pain. When I leave Kevin's home, I'll go to my own. My husband will still be on the ground, in pain, hurting, nagging, and yelling my name from across the house because the effects of chemo are too painful for him to bear alone. After I make his breakfast, I'll bring it to him, and depending on how he slept, he may or may not eat the accidentally burnt toast I made him. I'll give and give until I'm exhausted, until there's no more sweat to sweat because that's what love is. It's not leaving when it's hard. It's making the sacrifice for a year, or for the rest of our lives. I'll have to choose to love, to be patient, to be kind. There is power in the transformation that love provides. So I go back to the bartender from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poor, in sickness and health, until death does us part. That's it.